So what is better than a 7.1.4 stereo system? How about Ultimia Skywave X100 Dual? It's a 9.2.6 wireless surround sound system with two giant subwoofers here, both pumping out 600 watts of power, totaling 2,000 watts in the entire package. So excited, we got to get this thing out of the box, set it up, and see how loud it pounds. Let's do it. All right, let's get this thing open here. We got the dual subs, we got a bunch of speakers. Saw this at CES, and finally it's here in the house. You can see it says 46 kilograms on top. It was very heavy. Eric and I had to bring this thing in here together. Luckily it had handles, because that's like over 100 pounds, big box. Whew. Got a big old X on top here. Wow, I wanna open this first. What's in here? Okay, looks like we got some power connectors here, obviously some sort of guidebook here, and we got a little quick start guide going to give you guys kind of the layout of everything, all the different products and connections, and then obviously some placement here. We got the three-parted center channel or whatever, the front, left, and right, with some upfiring, and then two subs, and then we have 4 surround sounds instead of just 2 like we had on the other one. So we'll get into this and all that, remote guide, HDMI hookups. Pretty cool though. Very visually friendly setup guide, which is awesome. And then wall mounting guide as well. So if you want to put some of these speakers on the wall, you can do that. And we'll show you the brackets in a second. HDMI in here. We got an optical, so you can connect it either way. And then in these packages here are just like the power adapters. We'll pull one out here. Pretty standard AC adapter. You know, we got 4 of those right there. And then I think we have more of like the main big power supply for the soundbar here. So that's another one. And then these look like the brackets. If I remember correctly from the Skywave 70, which I'll differentiate from this X100 later, you know, they have these brackets, they have some power supplies, the speakers. It's all pretty similar, but there's a lot more included in this one. But of course, like I said, I'll go over the differences between the X70 and the X100 because there are some differences you'll want to know about. And then we have a couple more power cords. I believe these are for the subwoofers. So we have, you know, powers for the subwoofers, main unit, and then the 4 surround speakers there. And then there's just some screws for the mounts. These will attach the speaker to the wall plate, and then these wall plates to the wall right there. And then last but not least, the remote. Now, you're not always gonna need this remote because if you have it connected to your TV, you can use a lot of the features with the TV remote, and you know, you have the app, which will show you that you can kind of mess around with the EQ and all that. But it's nice to have a physical remote just in case other things aren't working. Here you go. So we gotta put this stuff aside for a minute and look at these speakers we have here. Looks like we have like a center, left, and right that connect in the front here, and then these are probably the 4 surround speakers, so we might as well just start opening these up. This has a pretty solid feel. I like the finish and the look of this. It's a pretty premium looking little rose gold, and I like that these have like the harder grates here, the plastic, as opposed to like the mesh. The mesh always ends up getting covered with dust and or dog hairs or whatever if you have pets. Very hard to clean. Much easier when it's like a nice solid finish like this. Connects to the center here. This one doesn't have anything else on it besides the wall plate. And yeah, this is gonna be the right, and you're gonna have the right channel, surround channel, and up firing all in this one speaker here. So we'll set that down. We're gonna get this one up. Should be the center. So fun unboxing products. Love it. Here we go. Yep. As expected, Ultimia right there. Got the capacitive touch buttons right up there. Connects to each side. And then on the back of this one, you have a couple of HDMI input outputs. So you can connect it to your TV. You can actually connect another device in there. If you have old school TV, you can use optical input, you know, USB for some media, and then of course the power. So pretty straightforward. You got a little brains of the operation in there. And then we're gonna set this down here. We'll connect them in a second. Then we have the front left. So there you go. Obviously gonna be opposite of the right. Again, left channel, surround, and an up-firing speaker. So we'll connect these real quick before we pull out those surround system speakers, but you kind of just turn it off angle a little bit here and then just snap it into place. It's pretty straightforward, very easy to do, pretty much idiot-proof here, you know. There you go. And there you have a big old soundbar in the front that's gonna pump some power at you with 5 front speakers and a couple up-firing. Right there alone, in many instances when you buy something like this, you're gonna be paying, you know, $1,000 just for that. And we haven't even really started unboxing the subs or these surround sounds. So we got a lot of value in this box. All right, next. I think these are all gonna be identical. So I will show you kind of what one looks like, and you're just gonna have 4 of them. So we got one forward facing speaker there, and then we're gonna have an up-firing speaker here. Something great about these speakers that I've never really seen before in a system is that you can control the volume that's coming out of the surround differently than you can control the up-firing speakers. So you can manipulate you can kind of tune it yourself. I'm excited for that because sometimes it depends on how, the vertical channels are hitting, that maybe you're not getting as much Atmos as you'd like, and you can increase or decrease that. It's all done through the app, so that's pretty awesome. So let's unbox the other 3 speakers here so that we can get them all set up. Like a kid on Christmas. Just gonna keep pulling them out. Just rip them out, who cares, right? There you go. All right, got those 4 speakers. Let's move these. I don't know if I can pick up all 4 at once. There we go. Because I wanna get to what's underneath there. I know, and I think you guys know, but that's what we all should be excited for, because what's a sound system if it only has treble and no bass, right? Let me see. That flew pretty good. All right, we got 2 boxes in here. Oh, you can see the little U for Ultimate. It's not too bad. It's a good weight to it. For a 10-inch sub that's pumping that much power, I think it's solid, but it's not like it's 100 pounds. Okay, there we go. Plastic's upside down, but this is the way we need to have it sit so that we can stand it up properly. Okay, I'm gonna carefully cut this, get this cardboard out of the way. I don't think I need the knife for the rest of it. Let's see. There we go. Got some rubber feet there, which is nice, so it's not gonna scratch up the floor or your speaker. Ooh, I like it. It's got that same like rose gold finish to it. Got a little logo, but we can't even see the logo. Should I pull the plastic? Let's do it. There you go. Nice shine to it, I like it. Now, we got 2 subs. I think I wanna put one in the front and the back, but for now, we'll set them both in the front and see how that goes, because it'll look cooler like that. But we'll see. They're both wireless, so you can put them anywhere you want in the room. And it's sometimes better to have them like opposite corners, so you have good bass and it kind of evens out so there's no dead spots. But we'll see in a little bit here once we get them all set up. So I'm gonna take this other one out. It's not that heavy. I'm being a little dramatic. Now this one doesn't have the plastic holding it. Yeah, it does, right there. Where'd my knife go? Careful, careful. All right, I got it upside down, but here's where the wrap opens. There we go. So same thing here. Ultimate on the front. Really cool design here on the side. I don't know, you can sneak in there, you can see the 10-inch sub. Looks pretty awesome, very solid. And then on the back, we got the port here. It's a solid port. You stick your arm in there, man. Standby on, and then the power connection there. So it's pretty straightforward. There's not really even like a pairing button. So let's see, is there something else on the front? No. So they must just automatically pair. Pretty straightforward. I've had other systems where I wasn't certain if the sub was paired, and then for like 2 months, I'm not even getting use out of my subwoofer, and it's like, that's annoying. So glad that you can just connect this stuff quickly. All right, good enough? Get this stuff out of the way here. I'm like out of wind unboxing this. Gotta get in shape. All right, we gotta get some of this stuff cleaned up and connect the 4 speakers in the rears here. And the fronts, to be honest, nothing's connected. There's all kinds of wires and everything. You guys probably don't wanna see all that. So we'll get that set up so we can come back and do some demos. All right. Woo! We got sound. We got things connected. We're lit up and ready to go. I messed the carpet up a little bit. Come on, Brandon. All right, that's better. So, pretty straightforward setup, to be honest. The front soundbar had its own adapter, and it even said soundbar right on it. So that was really easy. And then they came with an HDMI to connect that was labeled Ultimate, but we already have an HDMI in the wall. So for us, that was pretty easy just to use. And then the subs had their own power cord, straightforward, just plug and play on each side. So the front is good to go. However, in the back, that's where it got a little interesting, because you think there's no downside to having a lot of awesome speakers, right? But I guess placement is one of those downsides. You have to have some space and some tables to put them on, and even the power structure is a little interesting. I had to have like extension cords come out and, you know, plug them in, and they weren't gonna fit perfectly on the one type of extension cord. So you're gonna have to figure out for yourself where to place the speakers and how to power them, just because there's a lot of cords, a little bit of cord management involved, but they do have some nice Velcro zip ties on the back of each cord. So you can do some wire management, make it look a little bit less unruly. So now I have two speakers over here, and I'm interested to know if I should put maybe the surround back right here, because that maybe will give us some more separation, because I don't really have any other space. I could mount them. I think that's a good idea for a lot of people. We, you know, maybe moving in and out of this place a lot, so I'm not certain I'm gonna mount these on the wall, but that is an option. And, you know, I was incorrect before. They are not 4 identical speakers. I mean, they are in that they are 1.1, but they do on the back say, you know, where they're supposed to go. So like over here, I have the right side and the right surround, and then the left side, it says right on the speaker, you know, the left side, rear, and left surround speaker. So you just gotta make sure that the surrounds are up in front and then the rears are behind them, so you don't have the decoding going in the wrong direction, and you're not getting like a true flyover, or, you know, a bullet pinging around the room is not being sent in the wrong direction. So that's important. So now that we have it set up, I am gonna take a seat and we're gonna listen to some movies, some music, all that. And before I get into some specs here, let me give you one brief sound demo, just because you guys have waited this long.
The beast hides and thinks to be pierced on the outside. I must cut through it from the inside. The beast hides and thinks to be pierced on the outside. I must cut through it from the inside.
Okay, that was awesome. And we even got to see what it sounds like before and after the TV, because we did not have the HDMI connected to the eARC properly. Had the, you know, Xbox or PlayStation in there playing a game on there with that HDMI. So we had to connect it into HDMI 4 on this TV, and then boom, it lit up and you got the full force of the system pounding, really awesome. And while we were doing that demo, I've realized that this remote, not only is it backlit, which is super awesome, but it also has its own display at the top, which honestly, I've never really seen on any of the sound systems anywhere near this price point. So the fact that they have that screen up there, the little LED where you can see what's going on, the volume level, the bass level, all that's pretty awesome. And that it's backlit, you have no issues in the dark. And then I was messing around with the up firing level. You can move that from -3 up to +3. Of course, I'm gonna try to increase that. And the same for the surround sound. And then it has little EQ mode on here. I'm not exactly sure what that is doing yet. I wanna get into the app so I can just kind of fine tune the EQ and kind of pinpoint how that's gonna sound. But let me explain to you a few of the features of this system. So the X100 Dual. Now Altamia says this is the world's first true 360-degree wireless THX tuned home theater sound system. That's a lot to say, but it comes with Dolby Atmos and DTS:X. It's a 9.2.6 channel surround sound system, as we said, all wireless, with dual 10-inch subwoofers with frequency as low as 18 hertz, 2000 watt peak power, under 20 milliseconds latency, and it's able to pass through 8K HDR. They have gallium nitride amplifiers and their own Cinemesh wireless system built on a 5 gigahertz network that, from my experience, has really no interference issues. Definitely not at the house. And to be honest, there seemed to be no issues at CES either. And they had that set up in a very open room with tons of competition for Wi-Fi and networking and all that. And it sounded great. Now, I'm not going to read everything about their processor here, but I do know that it was a brand new processor made specifically for this X100 Dual. And it took them like a year and a half to make. So it's pretty impressive to know how much time and effort is put into just making the chip for this Skywave X100 Dual. So here are 6 key upgrades from the Skywave X70 that's very important. The first being that it's THX tuned, which is awesome. And it does support both Dolby Atmos and DTS:X. It does have 4 surround speakers, as I showed you before, compared to the 2. And as I said, what's really cool, it has independent channel level control, which I've never really seen before. It does have 8K HDR pass-through. And then finally, that backlit remote with display that I love. Anytime you give me me a backlit remote, I'm happy. One with the screen is even better. And another thing that I haven't mentioned yet is that they do make X100 regular, no dual. So if you don't need that crazy pounding bass, with the dual subs, you'll have an option that's a little less expensive, and we'll talk about the prices in a second. So I've downloaded the app. It's very user-friendly and easy to connect. I just had to make sure that the sound bar was on, and it was, and it found it right away. There's the X100 Dual, and it has, you know, volume right there at the top. It does have the EQ, which I'm gonna get into in just a minute. Obviously, power source, all that kind of stuff on there. So I watched a little bit more of the movie, and I was able to fine-tune the EQ a little bit, and I'll give you a demo on how it sounds in a second, but let me tell you what I did. So it started out in standard, and I got it into the cinema mode, but originally it was a little bit flat, zeros across the board. I definitely felt like it needed more of the high end, so I increased that treble up almost to the top, leaving the other two where they were, and I thought that that sounded great on its own there. But you can go in and go into the customize as opposed to the default, where you can really tweak the EQ. Now, typically I kind of make a V-shaped or U-shaped EQ out of this, but honestly, I still like the cinema better. However, you can go in, instead of equalizer, choose style. Then you can move the cursor around this 121 point system and really fine tune it. But the problem is I don't know exactly what each one of them sounds like. I have to move it to each one to get the difference. And for me, it's just easier for me to visualize it if I have an EQ. But this is nice too, and some people may like that option. But in the end, I'm just gonna go back to the cinema setting with the treble increased and leave the mid-range and bass even, because it has such incredible bass already and the mid-range sounds great. And this ended up being the best kind of mix to me. Then you also have the soundstage balance, and you have two options. You can just raise or lower it overall, or you can go independent and choose each speaker. Kind of cool options. If you're in the independent area here, you can see that this center right channel, I can increase the upfiring speaker, and it kind of shows it go up and down, which is pretty cool. Or you can also increase the surround sound itself on that one speaker. For me, it might just be easier to go to the overall and just increase it to kind of see where I'm at. But now that I have it to my likings, I'm going to play another sound demo with this setup and then that EQ and the treble raise. So let's see how that sounds now.
Good. I want to kill some guys. No, to make it do that, you have to be the greatest pilot in the universe. Lucky for us. Aye.
Okay, so that sounds so much better. Like a lot of products, when you get something out of the box, the EQ can be a little flat and it's really not, you know, up to its potential. So I'm glad I adjusted that. It sounds a lot better, and that's how I'm gonna leave it going forward. But we do have to get into some music, because I noticed you can choose a source. One of the sources is Bluetooth music. So now let's connect it to my phone and see how music plays off of the system. All right, so that sounded great. I did have to make a couple changes though. I realized I had, you know, the up firing and the surround a little bit too jacked up for listening to music, and to be honest, probably for movies as well. So I did lower those kind of to the baseline, because when I'm listening to music, you kind of want a lot of that sound to be coming at you. You don't necessarily need full surround sound for every song you're listening to. But in general, with that treble increased and even a little bit of the mid and bass, sounded fantastic. I could listen to that all day long. Tons of bass from this system, as you'd expect. And you can raise and lower that, especially since that bass button is the most, you know, ideal button. Accidentally pressing that instead of the volume, I think probably those should be switched. But in general, fantastic for listening to music. Highly recommended. But we really need to get into some gaming here, because if you're talking about another use case that's going to be great for the Skywave X100 Dual, it's going to be gaming. You know, lots of loud noises and fun times. And can you hear like people creeping up from behind when you're in gameplay? Let's find out right now.
/1, bogey down.
All right, so that sounds awesome as well. Definitely have a lot of immersiveness when you're playing games. Can figure out where everything's going on just as well as you can if you have headphones on. So that's going to be a great use case. Now, as far as the downsides go, there aren't really that many, but I would say that it came a little flat out of the box. But it's very correctable. I just increased the treble a little bit and it was good to go. I do like that it has the customization, so you can increase the upfiring sound or the surround sound in general, and you can do it per speaker. So that's something I'd never seen before, and I think that's a huge win. And then secondly, for downsides, there's a lot of speakers. I mean, you got to connect like 7 different things into the wall, even though it's wireless, and that's awesome. And it connects very well with the RF system. You still have to have space for all these speakers, right? So that's another thing that separates it from, the Skywave X70, which has 7.1.4. You're not going to have an additional pair of rear speakers. So I like this setup. I love the immersion, but you got to know you're just going to have some space for all the speakers. And now comes for the best news, which is the pricing for the X100 Dual and just the regular X100. So this entire system that we've been displaying retails for $999, $1,000, right? That is really impressive for how much bang for the buck you get. And the X100 with just one sub is only $800. So that's a $200 difference for that extra sub. And even better news right now during the Kickstarter, and for a limited time, you get an extra $100 off on each of those products. So $899 for the X100 Dual that I have set up in this room, and $699 for the regular X100. And that X100 is actually the same price on the Kickstarter as the X70 that we spoke about earlier. So if it comes down to you selecting the 100 with one sub or the 70 with one sub, you do get all those added features like the THX support, the DTS-X support. You have 2 extra surround sound speakers, the 8K HDR pass-through, and the backlit remote with display. So definitely some added features to get this unit over the X70. But for me, I'm gonna go with the dual subs. I think to have that extra power is always awesome. You never know when you're gonna need extra bass when watching movies, listening to music, playing video games. I think all of the different use cases can warrant that extra sub. And you know what? You can always just turn it down if you don't want it, but you can't add another sub if you don't buy it, right? But I definitely like this X100 Dual. I'm a big fan. Altamia makes some quality speakers. A lot of people comment on our videos how impressed they are with these Altamia speakers once they purchase it. So it's always great when regular consumers have that sort of positive feedback as well. So definitely check the Kickstarter link below. That $100 off will be for a limited time only. Get yours now. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. Make sure to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And we'll see you guys in the next video.